They gave me the post in the 3rd week of my rotation, which meant I had not yet learned to read the station the way the long-service crew read it. The way you read a living thing, by its breathing, by the small tightening around its joints that has nothing to do with any diagnostic display, and everything to do with having been there when it happened before. I was Junior Watch Officer, 2nd grade Cassia Thale, assigned to the ISS Inviolate Reckoning under Garrison Commander Etta Rye, and I had been on station for 22 days when the Sethori appeared. I want to be precise about what I knew at that point, because what I knew and what I did not know shaped everything that followed, and the contact report I filed after the engagement was criticized in 1 quarter for a perceived lack of context. The criticism, in my assessment, came from people who were not in the watch bay. They can read the log. I am giving them the context. I knew the station's designation. ISS Inviolate Reckoning, Iron Covenant Garrison Class, ring hull configuration, 4.1 kilometers outer diameter, listed in the Veltharn Junction Maintenance Registry as a navigational and relay platform. I knew its commission date, 1947 years prior, and I knew it had never been formally decommissioned, which I had taken to mean the administrative office responsible for decommissioning had never gotten around to the paperwork. Many things in the junction registry had that quality. The junction itself was old. The station was older. The decommissioning form was presumably on someone's list. I knew the station carried armament, because the garrison crew of 2,208 included a full weapons division, and the duty rotation posted me to fire control observation on even watches. I had not asked what the weapons were, specifically. The weapons division officer, a man called Holton with 28 years on the reckoning, had told me on my first day that the station's armament specification was in the Covenant Annex, Section 9, and that I was welcome to read it when I had time. I had not yet found the time. The duty cycle was busy, and in my first week I had been occupied learning the watch procedures, the log formats, the personnel rotation schedule, the maintenance cycle notation system, and the 17 separate filing protocols that governed contact reporting at a junction-class installation. By the time I had those in hand, the armament specification had slipped down my list. I knew Commander Rye. I had been on station 3 weeks, and I knew her the way you know your commanding officer when you are new, by her silhouette in the watch bay, by the particular way she held her coffee with both hands when she was thinking, by the way she acknowledged reports, a flat single nod that conveyed neither approval nor displeasure, only reception. She was 63 years old. She had been on the reckoning for 19 of those years, and before that at the Velmarin Junction installation for 11 more. When I arrived, she had shaken my hand, told me the station did not tolerate inaccurate contact logs, and gone back to whatever she had been doing. I had not yet understood whether she liked me, or disliked me, or had not yet formed an opinion. In retrospect, I understand that this was not a question she was in the habit of asking herself about junior officers. They were either accurate in their logs or they were not. Other qualities sorted themselves out in time. I knew about the junction itself. I had studied it at the academy. The Veltharn Junction, a natural gravitational convergence point where 12 major approach vectors from the outer Veltharith margin intersected within a volume of approximately 40 light-minutes. You could transit from the outer margin to the interior of this arm of the galaxy through the junction in a third of the time it took to route around it. This made it valuable. The station was there because the junction was valuable. This I understood. What I did not understand at the time was the precise nature of the word garrison. I had learned the definition at the academy, a military installation tasked with the permanent defense of a strategic location, and I had taken the word at its administrative face value without fully internalizing what permanent meant when applied to something that had been sitting at the Veltharn Junction for 1,947 years. This was a failure of imagination on my part. I note it not in self-criticism, but because it was shared by nearly every contact force the station had ever encountered, and I was in good company. The contact came in on the morning watch, hour 7, when the junction was as quiet as it ever got. There were 3 commercial transits in the outer approach corridor. A Velthareth bulk hauler filing through on a routine cargo route, a 2-ship survey consortium that had been in the junction for 4 days conducting a mapping project, and a passenger liner on the interior margin run that stopped at the junction waypoint every 12 days. The Velthareth survey barge that had been holding at the secondary waypoint for 6 days was still holding, still waiting on a transit clearance that had been delayed by a routing bureaucracy whose administrator was apparently on scheduled leave, and whose deputy had declined to sign clearances in their absence. I had been logging this situation daily. It had the quality of a minor institutional frustration that would resolve itself eventually, and would not be interesting to anyone in retrospect. I was at the long-range monitoring desk when the passive array flagged the signature. It was not a ship. It was a coherence pattern, a distributed resonance across a volume of approximately 11 light minutes, moving as a single formation. I had seen formation transits in the training simulations. I had seen them in the archive footage they showed us at the Academy, the Great Fleet passages of the consolidation era, hundreds of hulls in discipline so tight the passive array read them as one body with minor resolution variants. This was not that. This was something the array had no category for. The passive algorithm was attempting to resolve it into individual hull contacts and failing, because the contacts were not behaving like individual hulls. They were distributed, yes. The algorithm was finding approximately 40,000 distinct mass signatures, but the mass signatures were not moving independently. They were moving in a pattern that suggested coordination at a level far below what any signal lag between individual hulls could explain. They were moving as if they were a single thing that happened to occupy 11 light minutes of space. I flagged its standard priority. I was new. I did not know what I was looking at, and one of the first things the duty rotation taught you was that flagging something you could not identify as anything other than standard priority was the correct initial response. Emergency priority was for things that were already firing at you. Standard priority was for things that were large, unclassified, and moving toward the junction. The system would escalate the priority automatically if the contact met certain threshold criteria in the next 6 minutes. I logged the contact, entered the parameters, and noted the flagging decision in the watch log. Commander Rai was at my station in 40 seconds. She looked at the display for 3 seconds without speaking. She was holding her coffee with both hands. "Pull the contact class from the Covenant Annex," she said. "Section 4, subsection 7, Sethori formation signature. Read it. Get Holton." I pulled the annex while I called Holton on the Weapons Division channel. The Sethori Resonance Collective. I read the entry in the 80 seconds it took Holton to reach the watch bay, and I read it again afterward because I had not absorbed it correctly the first time. The entry was long. I will summarize what I understood from the first 2 readings and fill in what I learned from subsequent readings over the following hours. The Sethori Resonance Collective, a distributed consensus intelligence comprising between 30,000 and 45,000 individual hull units at last confirmed enumeration, the individual hulls averaging between 800 and 1,400 meters in length, operating as a single cognitive entity through synchronized resonance broadcast across all member hulls simultaneously. The collective did not have a fleet command structure in the conventional sense. There were no flagships, no admirals, no chain of command vulnerabilities. The intelligence was distributed across all hulls equally. Every hull was the mind. Every hull was also just a hull. Primary engagement doctrine, cognition suppression. The collective did not win conflicts through kinetic exchange. The collective won conflicts by suppressing the neural function of enemy command structures through synchronized resonance broadcast at close approach. The broadcast operated in a frequency range that affected neural tissue across most known biological architectures. The Academy note in the entry included a table of species and their susceptibility range, which covered everything I had ever studied in xenobiology. At close approach, the broadcast incapacitated enemy crews. Incapacitated did not mean killed. It meant rendered incapable of directed coordinated action. Personnel affected by standard broadcast intensity typically reported afterward, when they recovered, which took between 6 and 40 hours, that they had been aware of their surroundings but unable to initiate movement, unable to speak, unable to operate equipment, unable to do anything except observe. They had watched their ships drift and their formations dissolve and been unable to do anything about it. The collective had never, in confirmed contact events spanning 4 centuries of documented observation, been engaged in sustained kinetic exchange. Not because it was incapable of kinetic exchange. The individual hulls carried point defense systems rated for debris and micro-impact management, but because it had never needed kinetic capability. No enemy force had retained the neural coherence to mount kinetic response after standard broadcast, and therefore kinetic response had never materialized, and therefore no kinetic doctrine had ever needed to be developed. The collective had 147 engagements in 4 centuries without firing a weapon. They had won them by making their enemies stop working. Last confirmed position, outer Veltharith margin 4 years prior. Last confirmed trajectory, inward toward the junction. Reason for transit, unknown. The collective did not file transit notifications. Current contact, 11 light minutes out, moving at 0.07 light speed. Arrival at broadcast range, approximately 27 hours. I closed the entry. I looked at Holton, who had been reading over my shoulder. He said, 41,217 on the passive array. Commander Rye said, yes. She was still holding her coffee. Holton, issue the helm set. Full crew, full fit. I want confirmed seal on all 2,208 by hour 14. Holton said, starting now. He turned and left the watch bay at a pace that was not quite running. Commander Rye reached below the long-range monitoring desk and opened the lower equipment drawer. She lifted out an isolation helm. Old design. The matte gray military-grade neural shielding that I recognized from the Academy's History of Garrison materials, the kind they had stopped issuing to forward installations as part of a cost reduction program 8 years earlier. She set it on the desk in front of me. You will put that on, she said, and you will not take it off until I personally tell you to or until I am no longer able to do so. You will maintain your watch station. You will log everything you observe. You will not ask questions during the contact event. You will not comment on anything you observe until the contact is resolved. A pause. The log is the job. Can you do that? I looked at the helm. I thought about the Sethori entry. I thought about incapable of directed coordinated action. I thought about 2,208 crew and 1 station and 41,000 hulls. Yes, sir, I said. Good. She picked up her coffee. The helm set is in the equipment inventory under Covenant Annex Section 9, Subsection 3. It has been there for 1,419 years. It will work. Put it on. I put it on. The world narrowed. The soft, constant hiss of the isolation seal settled into my ears. A mild pressure across my temples indicated the neural shielding was active. I picked up my log stylus and I began to log the contact. What followed was 22 hours of the most ordinary watch bay activity I have ever experienced. I mean this precisely. The contact grew. The passive array refined its count as the formation approached. 41,217 individual hull profiles within the resonance signature, each between 800 and 1,400 meters. Combined mass assessment placing the formation at somewhere between 31 and 38 billion metric tons. I logged each refinement update as the array's resolution improved every 4 hours. I logged Commander Rye's advisory transmissions to the commercial traffic in the approach corridor, nonspecific, citing increased traffic density and possible transit delay, which caused 3 of the 4 commercial contacts to file expedited departure requests that were approved within the hour. The Velthareth survey barge had finally received its long-delayed transit clearance. I never learned whether this was connected to the station's contact alert, or whether the routing administrator had simply returned from leave and was accelerating out of the junction by hour 12 on a heading that would take it comfortably clear. I logged all of this. I was very careful about the log. Around me, the rest of the watch bay crew worked. From inside the isolation helm, with its mild audio damping, I could not hear conversations across the bay except on direct station channel, which was kept to operational traffic. What I could observe was people doing their jobs with a particular focused economy of movement. No wasted steps, no raised voices, nothing that would read to a casual observer as anything other than a standard watch rotation handling a high-priority contact event. The duty officer at the navigation desk was recalculating approach corridor clearances. The sensor operator at the secondary passive array station was refining the contact resolution parameters. The communications officer was cycling through the standard notification protocols for junction contacts at this distance and priority rating. I found this more alarming than visible alarm would have been. I had been on station 22 days. I was watching people prepare for the approach of 41,000 ships with the affect of a well-trained team working a problem they had encountered before. They had not encountered this specific problem before. The Covenant Annex showed no prior Sethori approach to the junction in its contact history. But the calm I was observing was not the calm of people who were unaware of the scale of what was coming. It was the calm of people who had been on this station long enough to understand that the scale was, in some fundamental sense, not the relevant variable. I thought about this for a while. I was 24 years old and 3 weeks into my first Garrison posting, and I had just read an archive entry about a 41,000 hull entity that won wars by shutting down enemy nervous systems, and the people around me were filing routine reports and running maintenance checks. Either the station's crew had a quality of nerve I had not encountered before, or they had a quality of understanding I had not yet arrived at, or both. I suspected both. I suspected that understanding and nerve were, at a certain depth of Garrison service, the same thing. I did not understand this yet. I logged it as an observation without analysis, because the log was the job. At hour 6, I finished reading the Covenant Annex Section 9 in full, the armament specification. 9 primary rail arrays, rated combined output of 4.1 terajoules per discharge cycle, full rotation arc. 47 secondary point defense batteries, independent traverse, overlapping fields of fire covering the full sphere. 12 long-bore kinetic projectors, forward arc, rated muzzle velocity 0.14 light speed, designed for precision engagement at extended range. The arrays had last been test-fired under live conditions 14 months prior, in a scheduled maintenance rotation. All systems had certified operational. I also read the Garrison Continuance Protocol. The language was old, the original Covenant language, 1,947 years old, though there were amendment annotations from every century since. The core text was unchanged. A Garrison installation designated under Iron Covenant authority at a strategic convergence point holds that designation in perpetuity, non-expiring, and the Garrison is authorized to enforce exclusion of unauthorized approach by any means available up to and including kinetic engagement. The exclusion boundary was defined as 0.9 light-years from the junction center. Any approach inside that boundary by a force not holding a valid transit authorization was an unauthorized approach. The Garrison was authorized to communicate once, specifying the exclusion boundary, and the option to file a transit authorization through the routing authority. If the approaching force did not comply, the garrison was authorized to open fire. This was the complete protocol. I read it twice. Then I read the amendment annotations. The annotations were bureaucratic in character, corrections to administrative address formats, updates to routing authority contact procedures, one amendment from 612 years prior clarifying that the transit authorization form had been renumbered in the regional administrative reorganization of that period. None of the amendments touched the core text. The core text had not changed because the situation it described had not changed. A garrison is a garrison. An unauthorized approach is an unauthorized approach. The 0.9 light-year boundary was the same boundary it had always been. I sat for a moment and thought about 41,000 hull contacts and the word authorized, and the 1,419-year-old isolation helm on my face. Then I went back to logging the contact. At hour 18, Commander Rye came to my station. She put her hand on the back of my chair and leaned in to look at the display. "Log current contact distance," she said, through the station channel. "Contact at 1.4 light minutes in closing. Estimated broadcast range in 4 hours and 11 minutes. She nodded. "Log this as context note, not transmission. The Sethori Resonance Collective has never communicated with a target prior to broadcast. They have not communicated with any target in 47 engagement events across 4 centuries. They approach, they broadcast, the target ceases to function. They have never been asked to stop because no one has been in a position to ask." She paused. "Log that." I logged it. She stood there for a moment. In the watch bay's ambient light with the isolation helm on, I could see her reflection in the passive array display, standing still, coffee in hand, looking at the formation count. "How old are you, Thale?" she asked. 24, sir." "Do you know how long this station has been here?" 1947 years, sir." "Do you know why it's here?" I considered my answer. "The junction," I said. "Traffic management, navigational support for the approach corridor." "Partly." She set her coffee down on the edge of the desk. "The junction is a convergence point. 12 approach vectors from the outer Velthareth margin intersect here within a 40 light-minute volume. If you control the junction, you control the transit route between the outer margin and the interior of this arm for approximately 1/3 of the accessible star systems in this sector. That has been true since before this station was commissioned. It will be true after the last person currently standing in this watch bay is dead." She looked at the display. "In 1947 years, 14 separate entities have decided they wanted to control it. They sent fleets. We filed contact reports." A pause. "The Sethori will be 15. She walked back to her station. I sat with that. 14 in 1947 years, and the station was still here. I went back to logging the contact. The Sethori broadcast began at hour 23, minute 11. I knew it had begun not because I felt it. The isolation helm held. The neural shielding was active. I felt nothing. But because the station-wide internal channel went quiet. Not silent. Quiet. The routine operational traffic that had been running continuously through the watch, maintenance status reports, deck check-ins, weapons division readiness updates, ceased in a period of under 2 seconds, as though someone had cut every transmission simultaneously at a single point. Every external sensor screen in the watch bay continued to update. The station systems were running. The station's crew was not. I looked around the watch bay. 7 other watch officers at their stations, all of them in isolation helms, all of them sitting with their hands at their consoles and nothing moving. I could see the helms. I could not see their faces through the visor film. I could not, from my position, determine whether they were conscious or merely still. The isolation helm's own diagnostic display showed my status. Isolation seal confirmed, neural shielding active, life sign monitoring nominal. I was, by every measure the helm could take, operating normally. I looked at Commander Rye's station. She was standing. Her helm was on. Her right hand rested on the fire control authorization panel, not pressing anything, not gripping it, just resting there with the particular stillness of a person who is waiting and knows they are waiting, and has decided that the waiting is the correct response for exactly as long as it needs to be. She turned her head. Through the visor film I could see her eyes. She was looking at me. I understood. She was confirming I was functional. I gave her the flat single nod I had learned from watching her. She turned back to the panel. The station-wide channel opened. A voice I had not heard before, not a crew voice, nothing in the station's communications register, came through at a register that was not quite sound. It existed below the range where you hear with your ears and at the edge of the range where you feel things in your chest, a low distributed pressure that had no specific content but had unmistakable presence. Even through the helm's audio damping I caught the edge of it, a vibration in the console beneath my hands. A faint resonance in the deck plating. Then the voice resolved into language. The station's translation layer rendered it in real time on my log terminal. SETHORI Resonance Collective, Primary Harmonic Broadcast, Open Band General Transmission. Target Designation, VLTHARN Junction Navigational Relay. Status in Collective Archive, NON Combat Infrastructure. Commission date unverifiable, predates Collective Archive Horizon. Armament status, not listed. Expected crew neural function status AT current broadcast intensity, suppressed. Collective broadcast is operating AT standard induction range. Standard suppression effect achieved in 47 of 47 prior engagements at this intensity. Compliance protocol applies. Relay designation will be converted to Collective Transit Coordination Node. Conversion procedure requires no further communication. Collective transit teams will proceed to relay boarding in approximately 3 standard HOURS. If any residual awareness persists in target crew, the collective acknowledges this is physiologically improbable AT current broadcast intensity, as standard broadcast has achieved full neural suppression in all prior engagements. The collective advises, directed action is NEUROLOGICALLY inadvisable. The collective does not issue this advisory as a threat. It is a physiological observation. Your current neural function status SHOULD already confirmed this pattern. Collective anticipates full junction transit coordination transfer within 6 standard HOURS. No kinetic exchange is required or anticipated. The translation stopped. I logged the transmission. Time of receipt, frequency band, translation quality rating. The log protocol required all 3. Commander Rye's hand moved from its resting position to the active surface of the fire control authorization panel. She placed her palm flat on it. The panel acknowledged with a tone that came through the deck plating rather than through the air. A single low note, felt more than heard. She opened the external broadcast channel. Her voice, when it came through my helm speaker, was flat and precise, with the same quality as her usual watch bay communications, neither elevated nor subdued, just accurate. Sethori Resonance Collective. ISS Inviolate Reckoning, Iron Covenant Garrison Platform, Veltharn Junction, Hull Commission Year 11 of the Second Covenant, Hull Identifier VII Reckoning Absolute. Armament, 9 primary rail arrays, rated combined output 4.1 terajoules per discharge cycle, full rotation arc. 47 secondary point defense batteries, independent traverse. 12 long-bore kinetic projectors, forward arc, rated muzzle velocity 0.14 light speed. Garrison crew, 2,208 fully operational. Neural isolation protocol active throughout crew complement. A pause of approximately 2 seconds. This station is in Garrison. The junction is in Garrison. This has been true for 1,947 years. We are filing this transmission as a contact record, not a negotiation. The Veltharn Junction exclusion boundary is 0.9 light-years from Junction Center. You are currently inside that boundary without a valid transit authorization. You have 11 minutes to initiate vector change to outside the exclusion boundary, or to file a transit authorization through the Veltharn Routing Authority. This is the single communication the Garrison Protocol requires us to make. After 11 minutes, we will open fire with primary array. She closed the external channel. The watch bay was silent, except for the soft diagnostic hum of the monitoring equipment, and the faint continued vibration in the deck plating that told me the collective's broadcast was still running. I logged the transmission. I noted the time, contact event hour 23 minute 14. I noted the collective's status, formation holding current approach vector. I noted the station's status, Garrison protocol active, fire control authorized. Then I sat and logged the silence. The collective responded in 4 minutes and 8 seconds. HFY Resonance Collective. Secondary Harmonic Review initiated. Target Designation. VLTHARN Junction Navigational Relay. Archive entry under active review. Collective notes discrepancy between archive entry and received transmission content. Archive entry LISDS target as NON combat infrastructure with 0 armament status. Received transmission includes armament specification and garrison designation and neural isolation reference. Collective initiates secondary archive query. Term, Iron Covenant. Term, Garrison Platform. Term, Neural Isolation Protocol. Iron Covenant archived. Historical political structure dissolved 847 years prior. Administrative records incomplete. Garrison Platform archived. Subentry. Iron Covenant Garrison Class. 63 designated installations listed AT time of dissolution. Current operational status of listed installations. Unknown dissolution records incomplete. Collective notes. Target transmission references Hull Commission date, year 11 of the Second Covenant. This predates collective archive origin point by approximately 1,200 standard years. No records available for verification. Collective is recalibrating broadcast to increased neural suppression intensity. Standard intensity has achieved full suppression in 47 engagements. If anomalous residual function is result of biological variation in target crew, increased intensity will correct this. Collective requests, target crew confirm current neural function status. I logged the transmission. I noted the confirmation request as the first interactive communication the archive entry said the collective had ever made to a target. I noted it as significant and flagged it for the post-event analysis section. Commander Rai opened the external channel. We are at full neural function. The isolation protocol is listed in Covenant Annex Section 9, Subsection 3. The helm set has been in this station's inventory for 1,419 years. It is not a biological variation. It is equipment. A pause. Recalibrating your broadcast will not change this. You have 8 minutes. She closed the channel. 3 minutes and 40 seconds. Then. HFY Resonance Collective. Tertiary Harmonic Review initiated. Collective confirms broadcast RECALIBRATION complete. Current broadcast intensity, 340% of standard suppression threshold. This intensity exceeds all prior engagement parameters. No prior target has required this intensity. Collective has no archive record of a target maintaining neural function AT this broadcast intensity. Collective notes. This is an anomalous situation. Collective query, what is the quarrel? I stopped logging for approximately 1 second when I read the translation. Then I resumed. The log was the job. Commander Rye, none. You are approaching the junction. The junction is in Garrison. The garrison is permanent and non-negotiating under Covenant Annex authority. That is the complete situation. 22 seconds. SETHORI Resonance Collective. Formation Query. What does the garrison require? Commander Rye, for you to alter your approach vector and maintain distance outside the Veltharn Junction exclusion boundary, 0.9 light-years from junction center. If you have a legitimate commercial transit requirement, file a waypoint request through the Veltharn Routing Authority when you have cleared the boundary, and a convoy escort will be assigned. If you do not have a commercial transit requirement, maintain distance. A pause. 4 minutes. 12 seconds. SETHORI Resonance Collective. Formation Query. The collective has engaged 47 target forces in 4 centuries. 0 target forces have retained neural function after broadcast. This is the 48th engagement. The collective does not understand why neural function is retained by target crew. Commander Rye, Section 9, Subsection 3. It is in the archive if the archive is complete enough to hold it. She paused. You have 2 minutes. 22 seconds. SETHORI Resonance Collective. Formation Query. The collective does not have kinetic engagement protocols. The translation sat on my screen for a moment. I read it. Then I read it again. Commander Rye's response came quietly. She said, I know. Then, after a pause of approximately 6 seconds, she said, I know that too. Then 1 minute. No further transmission from the collective. At 53 seconds, Commander Rye removed her hand from the authorization panel, placed both palms flat on the desk edge, and said to the watch bay in general, Holton, primary array, rotation 1 through 9. Open with a 3-battery salvo, independent spacing, targeted formation center mass, then continuous until I say otherwise. Holton's voice steady, Aye, Commander. The station opened fire. I have been asked to describe the engagement in detail, and I have given the same answer each time. Read the log. Everything I observed is in the log. I logged continuously for the full 71 minutes of the engagement, with no gaps except for 3 periods of 30 seconds or less, when I was adjusting the display parameters to maintain resolution as the formation shifted. Everything I have to say about the engagement is in the log with timestamps. What I can add here, outside the formal log, is the quality of the experience as I lived it. The first discharge from the primary array came at 1 minute and 6 seconds after the broadcast I have logged above, and I felt it through the deck plating before I heard anything, a deep rhythmic percussion that came up through the chair, through my spine, through the helm's padding. Not violent, not alarming. Methodical, the way a large piece of precision machinery sounds when it is doing exactly what it was designed to do. I looked at the formation display. The collective was at 11 light minutes. That meant the salvo would travel for 11 minutes before it reached the formation, 11 minutes during which I was watching the passive array show me 41,000 contacts holding their approach vector, continuing inward, apparently unaware that 3 rail array discharges rated at a combined 4.1 terajoules per cycle were already in transit toward their formation center mass. This was the thing I had not fully absorbed when I read the armament specification. The station's weapons were designed for engagement at range. The long-bore kinetic projectors were designed for precision at range. You fired and then you waited, and then, if your fire solution was correct, something happened 11 light minutes away, and the passive array showed you the result. The station was not a warship that closed to fighting distance. It was a platform that sat at the junction and reached out. At minute 4 of the engagement, the collective formation began what I can only describe as an attempt at evasive maneuver. I use the phrase advisedly. A 41,000 hull distributed consensus intelligence that had never needed kinetic engagement doctrine was experiencing, For the first time, the problem of being fired at from a fixed position at range. The individual hulls at the formation's outer edge began to accelerate laterally, which opened gaps in the formation geometry. This was, I think, a distributed reaction, not a commanded maneuver from a central intelligence, but the individual response of perimeter hulls to the incoming fire that the passive array was now resolving into specific impact events. The gaps opened more quickly as the lateral acceleration spread inward. The formation coherence was degrading. The degradation had a secondary effect that I logged, but did not fully understand until afterward. As the formation coherence degraded, the collective's broadcast began to show intensity variance on the station's resonance monitoring system. The broadcast was not a transmitter in the conventional sense. It was a synchronized output from all 41,000 hulls simultaneously. When the formation geometry lost coherence, the synchronization lost precision. The broadcast intensity, which had been running at 340% of the standard suppression threshold, began to fluctuate. It never dropped below the station's helm-shielded tolerance level, but the fluctuation itself was a piece of information. I logged it. At minute 19, the collective broadcast again, targeted beam rather than open band. The translation read, "The collective does not understand this engagement. Please advise what is required to cease fire. Commander Rai, withdraw outside the exclusion boundary, 0.9 light years. File a transit authorization if you require corridor access. When the withdrawal is confirmed outside the boundary, fire ceases." The collective did not respond to this transmission for 11 minutes. During that 11 minutes, the engagement continued. I logged 14 separate impact event assessments from the passive array. The array could not achieve individual hull resolution at the formation's current position and density, but it could assess mass displacement events, and 14 events logged as hull loss probabilities above 80%. I logged them all. At minute 31, a formation element of approximately 8,000 hulls on the approach vector leading edge attempted a high-velocity transit past the station. The probable logic was that at sufficient velocity, the formation element could pass through the station's forward arc before the primary arrays could complete a tracking adjustment. The long-bore kinetic projectors tracked the transit element automatically. The targeting system was 1,947 years old and had been designed by people who understood that targets would attempt high-velocity transits and had built the tracking solution for exactly this scenario. The muzzle velocity of 0.14 light speed was not an accident. It was a design choice made by engineers who had anticipated the problem. The transit did not complete. I logged the event. I noted that the passive array's hull loss probability assessments for the transit element period were running above 90% on 37 separate contact references before the element broke formation and redirected. I noted this because the log required specificity wherever specificity was possible. At minute 44, the collective broadcast again. The collective requires clarification. The Garrison protocol states permanent and when negotiating authority. The collective queries, is this authority specific to the current command officer of the garrison, or does it persist beyond the individual? I remember reading this translation and understanding, with a clarity that surprised me given the circumstances, what the collective was actually asking. They were asking whether killing Commander Rai would end the engagement, whether the authority resided in a person or in the station. Commander Rai read the translation. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Covenant Annex, Section 2, Paragraph 1. The garrison authority is institutional. It exists independently of any individual commanding officer. Garrison personnel are replaceable. Garrison authority is not. A pause. You have not identified a pathway to resolution through this question. The only pathway to resolution is withdrawal outside the exclusion boundary. 18 seconds, then. The collective acknowledges. After that, no further communication from the collective for 21 minutes. During those 21 minutes, the engagement continued at the same methodical pace. The passive array was now showing me what I estimated, and logged as an estimate, because precision was not achievable at this density, as between 700 and 900 hull loss events across the formation. The formation had lost most of its geometric coherence. Individual hulls were maneuvering independently, which meant they were no longer operating as a consensus intelligence. They were operating as individual decision units, which was something the collective had apparently never needed to do before. I logged this too. I noted it in the context section as potentially the most significant outcome of the engagement, beyond the kinetic exchange. The collective had ceased to function as a collective. At minute 63, the broadcast resumed, open band. The SETHORI Resonance Collective is withdrawing. Commander Rye said, Holton, track withdrawal, maintain fire until the formation clears 0.9 light-year boundary. Holton, I. The withdrawal took 8 minutes. I watched it on the passive array, 41,000 contacts, or what remained of them, resolving their individual trajectories into a common heading away from the junction. By minute 71, the last hull contact had cleared the 0.9 light-year boundary marker. Commander Rye said, Holton. Cease fire. Holton, I. Commander, ceasing fire. The rhythmic percussion through the deck plating stopped. Commander Rye said, damage survey all decks, report by hour. I was logging the time. I logged it. I logged the formation withdrawal confirmation. I logged the ceasefire order and the time it was given. Then I looked up from my terminal and looked at the watch bay, and I saw the forward observation window. The long forward window that looked out over the approach corridor and the junction spread across the station's forward arc. It was cracked, not broken. A hairline fracture running from the upper left corner to the approximate center of the outer pane, with a secondary radial fracture at the midpoint where the primary crack had propagated into the next layer of the tripled glass. The seal was intact. The crack was in the outer layer only. The window was, by every structural assessment I could identify from my position, still functional. I logged the window damage, time of observation, location, preliminary assessment. Then Commander Rye said quietly on the station channel, damage report, Deck 9. There was a pause of approximately 4 seconds, then a voice I did not recognize. Commander, we have a breach. Section 9 Alpha, Outer Ring Sector 3. Hull integrity loss. Commander Rye said, casualties. 2 confirmed, Commander, 1 critical, 1, the voice paused. I heard something in the pause that I could not name at the time. Commander, you need to come to Deck 9. The station channel was silent for 11 seconds. Then Commander Rye said, log entry Thale, contact event resolved, junction status, Garrison active and continuing. Station status, operational with hull damage, Deck 9 Alpha, Outer Ring Sector 3 damage assessment ongoing. Armament status, fully operational. Formation withdrawal confirmed at 0.9 light-year boundary. Total engagement duration, 71 minutes. Incoming contact count, 41,217. Hull loss assessment. Post-event analysis will confirm preliminary passive array estimate 1,847 contacts. She paused. File the contact report, full log, unedited, to the Veltharn Routing Authority and to the Iron Covenant Garrison Record Office, both unedited. I said, yes, sir. She said, you can take the helm off now. I heard her walk to the watch bay door. I heard the door open and close. I took the helm off. The watch bay's air hit my face with the particular quality of station air that you stop noticing after the first week, processed, faintly metallic, maintained at a temperature and humidity that was technically comfortable without being comfortable in any way that mattered. Around me, The other 7 watch officers were removing their own helms. Nobody spoke. Holton sat at the weapons division station with his hands flat on the console and looked at the passive array display showing the departed collective formation and said nothing for a very long time. I filed the contact report to both addressees, full log, unedited, and then I sat at my station and waited for the damage report from Deck 9 to complete. Commander Rye died at 8:47 station time, Deck 9 Alpha, Outer Ring Sector 3. The full engineering assessment took 4 days and is in the record. The short version is this. The outer ring of the reckoning was the station's primary kinetic engagement bearing surface, the geometry that presented the most surface area to incoming fire from any approach vector, and that therefore absorbed the most stress during an engagement. In 1,947 years of Garrison operation, the outer ring had been stressed by engagement events on 14 prior occasions. The alloy plating on sectors 2 through 7 of the outer ring was replacement alloy on some panels, original alloy on others, and the original alloy, 1,947 years old, maintained and inspected on the Garrison engineering cycle, was structurally sound but not equivalent to modern materials. The breach in Section 9 Alpha was assessed as a stress failure in an original alloy panel that had been at the edge of its rated service parameters for some years. The engagement had not caused the failure. The failure would likely have occurred in the next scheduled engineering cycle regardless. The engagement had accelerated it by approximately 18 to 24 months. Commander Rye had been at the breach site directing the damage team when a secondary decompression failure in the adjacent panel extended the breach before the emergency seal could complete. The record gives the technical details. I do not have anything to add to the technical details. I filed her Garrison citation recommendation before I filed anything else. I filed it to the Iron Covenant Garrison Record Office at the same time I filed the contact report in the same transmission as the first attachment. The Record Office confirmed receipt. They noted that citation review for kinetic engagement events ran on a standard timeline of 14 months. I acknowledged the timeline and logged the response. The Garrison Engineering Division completed the outer ring repair in 11 days. The replacement alloy on Section 9 Alpha is modern material, rated to current standards, indistinguishable from the surrounding hull plating unless you know where to look and check the composition code. The watch bay window was replaced on day 3. The new pane is rated to the same specifications as the original. What I know about the Sethori Resonance Collective in the 18 months since the engagement. They withdrew to the outer Velthareth margin. They have not returned to the Veltharn junction boundary. The routing authority sent the standard commercial transit inquiry form, the form they send to any fleet-sized contact that approaches the junction without a filed waypoint, and the collective did not respond. The form was filed as unacknowledged and archived. This is the standard protocol for non-response. The collective has not been confirmed in contact with any other target force in the 18 months since the engagement. I cannot say whether this reflects a change in their operational posture, a period of internal reorganization following the disintegration of their consensus formation during the engagement, or simply the normal interval between engagements for an entity operating on a timescale that is not indexed to standard months. The post-event analysis from the Garrison Record Office assessed the hull loss figure at 1,847 confirmed contacts, which represents approximately 4.5% of the total formation count. The analysis noted, in the summary paragraph, that this was the first kinetic exchange recorded in any Sethori Resonance Collective contact event. The summary used the word unprecedented. The analysis was otherwise dry. The Covenant Annex entry for the Sethori Resonance Collective has been updated by the Garrison Record Office. The update reads, 48 engagement events, 1 contested, It does not expand on contested. It does not need to. I am still on station. The Reckoning has a new garrison commander, Sever, 19 years garrison service at the Velmarin Junction installation, the same installation where Commander Rye spent 11 years before the Reckoning. He shook my hand when he came aboard and told me the station did not tolerate inaccurate contact logs. I said I had been told that. He nodded and went to inspect the Deck 9 Alpha repair. The commercial traffic through the junction is at normal levels. The Velthareth survey barge returned 3 weeks after the engagement and completed its mapping project. The routing administrator's deputy has apparently been granted signing authority for transit clearances during leave periods, which has resolved the 6-day delay problem. These are the things that happen at a junction station between contact events. I log them. Holton told me, without being asked, one evening in the watch bay at the end of a quiet watch, that the last time the Reckoning had replaced an outer ring alloy panel had been 214 years prior. He told me this in the same tone he used when he gave me information about duty rotations or equipment inventory. He was not being sentimental. He was being accurate. I thanked him and logged the maintenance reference. I have been asked several times since the engagement what it was like. I keep returning to the difficulty of the question, and I think the difficulty is this. What I observed was not dramatic in the way people expect dramatic things to be. It was very quiet. It was very precise. It was an old station doing what old stations are built to do, with equipment that had been in the inventory for 1,419 years, because one commanding officer after another had filed the exception form on every cost reduction review. And the Garrison Supply Authority had approved the exception because the Covenant Annex said to approve it, and nobody had needed to explain why until the morning the Sethori arrived. The collective had 41,000 hulls and 4 centuries of undefeated engagement history, and a broadcast that had stopped every target force it had ever encountered. They had an archive entry for the Reckoning that said non-combat infrastructure, because the archive had been built from records that predated the collective's origin, and those records were incomplete, and nobody had visited the junction in 1,947 years with the explicit intention of cataloging what the station actually was. The archive listed the station as a relay. The station had been a relay in its earliest commissioned role when the junction was first established. It had become a garrison installation in year 11 of the Second Covenant. The archive's entry had not been updated since some time before the collective's origin point. Nobody had corrected it because nobody had needed to correct it. Until the morning the Sethori arrived. The isolation helm was in a drawer under the long-range monitoring desk. The armament specification was in Section 9 of the Covenant Annex. The Garrison Authority was institutional, permanent, non-expiring. None of these things were secret. They were old. There is a difference between secret and old, and the difference is this. A secret requires someone to actively conceal it. Old things simply persist, unchanged, through every moment in which someone could have looked more carefully and didn't. The station has been here for 1,947 years. The junction has been in garrison for 1,947 years. 15 entities have approached the junction with the intention of controlling it. 15 contact reports have been filed. The station continues to hold. I am the watch officer on this rotation. The log is current. The junction is clear.